This is the Doubtless Podcast, here to help you change from a state of doubt and insecurity towards a more calm, confident, and doubtless self. I'm your host, Coach and Psychologist Julian, and my guests are remarkable, ambitious humans who share their stories of doubtful moments, of their insecurities, and how that shaped their successes today. I am so excited to finally talk to you, Patrick, about the whole topic about procrastination, and especially your book that I just got really excited about reading, How to Be a Better Procrastinator.
Right.
And that is just an exciting read for me because I've been on the topic for such a long time already. And one thing I want to start out with about the book is you describe very explicitly what is the main theme in the book. And you wrote, one of the most important themes of this book is the critical need to figure out what really matters to us personally and professionally. And obviously, the first question I have in my mind is, when you wrote that book, what was your theme about? Why did you want to write this book? Like, what was your professional idea about writing this book?
No, that's a great question. I've been a lifelong procrastinator, and I wrote the book right when COVID hit in this country here. Things just shut down, and I was on the road just ridiculously, and 160, 70 days a year, and I found myself for the first time almost in my adult life that I had time, a lot of time. And I looked around my office, which has got boxes and boxes and boxes of books and things. And I had 3 boxes on procrastination because over the years, I've cut out articles, I've interviewed people, and I'm trying to figure out how do I kind of manage this. So I also know that people who procrastinate, and there's a lot of people who procrastinate, suffer from a lot of anxiety and stress and guilt from their habit. And I said, I think I can help them because I lived the experience. And the other theme in the book, Julian, is you might be able to cure it. I mean, psychologists say go to therapy for a long time. You can probably, cure it. I said, how do we learn to manage it? And that's what the book's about is here's about 50 strategies that you can use that can help you manage your procrastination as opposed to cure it. Because I'm not a psychiatrist. I have a doctorate in organizational leadership. But it was like to help people. And many years ago, I was a teacher and a principal of a school. And, in my heart, I'm a pretty good teacher. And I said, how can I write a book? And I've written 12 books. So obviously procrastinators get things done eventually. This is the one I feel that really will help people. That makes sense at all.
Wonderful. So it's exactly as you said. What also comes through is quite often we can't really cure it. And we'll get into the nitty-gritty why. But I think an important theme is that just how can you learn tools and ways to manage it, get better at it, and actually feel good about it. I think that is such an important theme about procrastination, and also that you have in your book. So what role does emotions play in procrastination?
Yep, absolutely. Basically, procrastination is an emotional management challenge. Now, some people say it's a problem, but what happens is most of the time, people are facing a task that they either don't want to do, it's overwhelming, it causes them a lot of stress, and they don't know how to begin, and the emotions are really intense. Stress, anxiety, oh my God, what am I supposed to do here? And the minute you step away from the task, the emotional relief is instantaneous. It just, I don't feel the stress anymore. Now, intellectually, we talked about this, I know I got to do the task, but right now my emotions, I'm feeling a lot better. And that's the hook. That's the habit that some of these other guys talk about. Intense feelings, usually negative. You step away from the task, there's relief, and it just keeps that habit going. And we talked a little bit about meditation, that one of the things that people can do to manage their procrastination is learn to meditate, because then you just begin to see your thoughts over time. It takes a little while to meditate. 10 minutes a day is fine. You don't have to do 30 minutes or an hour. And you see your thoughts, and you don't have to react to your thought. What we do as procrastinators, the minute we feel that stress, we step away from it. And learning to manage your emotions, some people call it surfing your emotions, just watching it kind of, and that can be a nice strategic wedge to kind of break that chain.
Okay. And so emotions are such a powerful path or a powerful thing in our body. I I even would say that emotions probably create most of the behavior that we have in a day to day.
Absolutely.
And mm, I, although I have this quite often, I'm just using myself now because I want to learn about myself as well in this
Yeah.
interview. Is if I would just do X, Y, Z, I know I would be successful. If I would just, every day post something on social media, if I would just have more interviews, if I would just, this kind of thought pattern I have, if I would just do those things, I'd be successful. I'd make it. Whatever dream or pursuit there really is. But I still don't. Even though it is so clear, I have the idea, I just need to do this and it's all going to be great and solved. But I don't do it. Why? Why is
Well,
that?
yeah, a couple of reasons maybe is I think we tend to be very over aspirational. So people say, "Oh, I'll do a podcast every day." Well, that's probably overachieving. I mean, if you did one a week over a year's period of time, you'd have a body of work that'd be pretty impressive. So a lot of procrastinators uh, are just have their aspirations are too high. And I wrote a book on goals. How do in my business, I do a lot of strategic planning. Coming up with bright ideas is not hard for people, right? This is where we want to go. The hard work is lifting it up and moving it forward. And what we found in the research was, and this comes from a guy named Daniel Kahneman, who's an American psychologist. He's actually Israeli American. He just passed away. He got the Nobel Prize for economics in 2002. Brilliant guy. And he says it always takes longer and it's always harder. So I think that's a kind of a culmination of the life's research that, yeah, it is going to be harder. I mean, it always looks good on paper, right? And it's going to be harder and longer to accomplish meaningful things. So cutting your goals in half and giving yourself more time are the ways to get out of that kind of dynamic, if that makes sense. Cut your goals in half and give yourself more time, because we're very bad at deadlines. And we think, oh, I can do that in 2 weeks. I can write the book. Oh, give me a month. I'll write the book. Well, that's ridiculous. Very few people in the world's history have written a book in a month. But we're very aspirational. We try to bite off more than we can chew, as opposed to doing it in incremental kinds of chunks, chewable chunks, we call that in our business. And over time, building the success that you want to have. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, a little bit. But now I feel like, okay, wait, it takes way longer than I estimate right now.
Yeah,
And it's way harder than I think.
yeah, it's
I don't
hard.
even want to start now. It's like,
Right.
I
No,
have
no.
this fantastic idea in my mind of like maybe let's take the example of a podcast. In a year's time, I want to have 500,000 total downloads, let's say,
Okay.
and that means every single day I probably need to work to do something to it. I have interviews
Right.
edited, reach out to new podcast guests, all of these things. And when I think about this now, that seems pretty big. Like for the
It is big.
next whole year, I have
It's
to do all of these things. I don't even want to start now.
Yeah. Well, that's that 500,000 is a lot of people, right? And so you're doing the editing, you're doing the soliciting with the interviews. I mean, you're doing. Can someone else help you do that? Can someone else do the scouting for you? I mean, that's how I would say. Can somebody else help you get those interview people, and so you don't have to do that, because that's hard work. That's a lot of time and effort and things like that. Can you get help from somebody else? Um, Procrastinators are very bad at asking for help.
Mhm.
They get into they got to figure it out all themselves. So, is there a way that you can delegate that to someone else by paying somebody, right? Or a peer, we call peer delegation, where I, I'm pretty prolific as a writer, but I'm very bad with punctuation and editing. Well, I got a couple of my buddies who love to do editing. So I kind of produce the stuff, very informal, and they just rip it up and make it a lot better. So they can't do what I do, and I can't do what they do. So that's that peer delegation. So I don't have to think about, oh, I got to write this book and edit it really effectively. It's really hard to edit your own work. So you get that off to somebody else, or you pay an editor to do that, and then you can move forward on your strengths, what you can do really well.
Okay, so instead of like just crippling under this idea of, oh, I will never be
500,000.
able to do that. Oh my God, that seems way too big. It almost sounds like you switch mindset and look into, wait, okay, this is a big task. How can I actually make that easier? How can I make that easier for myself? Is that the
Abs-
idea?
absolutely. Can I tell you a quick story?
Yes. Yes, go
So I
ahead.
got a call from a buddy of mine who has a 3-car garage, and he's not a hoarder, but he collects things, antiques and things. And the whole garage is full of stuff and boxes. And his wife was getting very upset because she couldn't park the car and the kids couldn't even park their bikes. So every Saturday he'd get up and he'd raise the 3-car garage roof or door, and he would just go, oh my God, and just shut it. And he says, help. And I said, listen, here's an idea. Is there somebody else in your neighborhood who's got a cluttered garage? He said, the guy right across the street, Henry, he's worse than I am. Get a 6-pack of beer, knock on his door and say, Henry, I'd like to help you clear out your garage for an hour today, and I'll buy you a beer. Does that sound like a good idea? And Henry's saying, what? That sounds like a great idea. And the only deal I want to do is next week, you're going to come to my house and you're going to buy me a beer and you're going to help me for an hour. Now, it took him 3 months, back and forth, back and forth. Sometimes they did 2 hours, but they were trying to manage effectively. In 3 months, they had a garage, both of them, where he could fit 1 car. That's a victory. Then have it all organized and sequential and that kind of stuff. They organize it so that you can put a car in there and the bikes in both garages. They helped each other out. Does that make sense?
Yes. So not only just do I get the idea that, oh, I have to do it not alone anymore. So I have like a
Right.
buddy that it's just emotional support, let's say, but also like accountability that, okay, next week we'll do it. Well, it's just no matter what, we just do it.
They kept their word, and they explored beers too. They decided to have the same beer. They said, hey, let's pick something different next week. So we call that temptation bundling. And that's when you marry something you don't like to do with something you do like to do. And so just a cold beer with a buddy made the task less noxious and enabled them to and they would talk and chit and chat and all that kind of stuff. And for an hour, sometimes they went over, but they said, if we get an hour, that's a victory. They're really reasonable with themselves. So temptation bundling is a powerful notion. If you can marry a negative task with a positive task. So if you don't like to exercise, you exercise with a friend, or you play music while you're exercising. Get a positive with a negative, and oftentimes you can move the ball forward.
Okay, that reminds me again of just managing the emotion, right? You instead of just doing the bad task, the task that
Yes,
might annoy you, you're inducing or lowering the threshold that you can actually more easily go through it. You maybe even start the music before you go to the gym, feel already in good mood, and then you can just continue with that.
absolutely. And for procrastinators, I mean, you talked about starting is the hardest part for a procrastinator, right?
Why is that though?
Well, the emotions are there. Oh my God, I can't do that. Stressful. It's going to be too hard. Step away. So if you have rituals or routines, and I'll explain the difference between those 2 things, they can kind of jumpstart you to begin, because the beginning is the key. And then what we know in the research is that if you begin a task, 50% of the time people will continue. Not all the time, but 50%. And that's pretty good. That's a pretty good average. So the difference between a routine, like when I walk 10,000 steps a day, I used to be able to run, but I've gotten older and my knees are gone, but I can walk forever. And I made a goal, Pat, 10,000 steps a day. And I've got about a 99% success rate. And what I found when I first started doing this habit is I'd get up in the morning, get a cup of coffee, and say, okay, now where are my shoes? And it's raining outside. Do I need to wear a hat? And I'd sit down and say, oh, the heck with it. Let me have another cup of coffee. And now what I do is there's a certain part of my foyer where I have my shoes, raincoat, gloves, whatever I need in the season. I get up, have a cup of coffee. It takes me less than a minute to get dressed, and I'm out the door. And that routine is very, very helpful for me.
Yeah.
Other people, like someone like Hemingway, the great Nobel Prize winner, his routine was he would stand while he was writing. He would work for 5 hours a day or until he produced 5 pages. And that routine, he won the Nobel Prize twice, so he had he just didn't kind of wander around. He had a very, very specific routine. And a ritual It's something that puts you in a nice psychological state. So we talked a little bit about meditation. Some people will meditate for 7 or 8 minutes or 10 minutes before they begin the task, and they feel good. Some people will play some favorite music and sets a tone. Sometimes a really, really exciting tone. Sometimes it's just a really soft and gentle tone. Um, I've got one friend who uses incense. The incense and just smelling this beautiful thing just puts her in a psychological state to kind of move things forward. So routines and rituals are really, really helpful.
Right. So that again puts the focus on managing the emotion. I see that at least as a theme. Like rituals, you put yourself in this mindset that you are ready and open to go through this. And also the routines help you to, no matter how you feel, you're still doing. So
Yeah,
it's,
it's automatic. It
yeah.
just becomes an automatic habit. And James Clear talks a lot about that, just an automatic habit. So you don't have to really think about it, but you get it done. I mean, I'm very proud of the fact, if it's raining and snowing, I got all this gear I need to do because I could say, oh, it's cold out there, Pat. Well, I can wear an extra pair of gloves or an extra warm hat. I feel very proud that I do that. And I do that first thing in the morning because it starts my day off. I've already got, on my agenda. I don't know if you can see that with this screen. I have my agenda every day. It's big in yellow. And the first thing is 10,000 steps. So when I sit down around 9:30 with a black marker, I knocked that off and I said, Pat, you've already accomplished something important for your physical and your mental health.
Oh, that's an important part because you also had a quote in your book from which is, it's not about to be busy, so are ends. The question is, what are you busy about? And so I guess the question for you is now, why is it for you so important to have those 10,000 steps?
Because I realize if I want to have a good older life, and I'm not a young kid anymore, I've got buddies of mine that, they got walkers, and they're overweight. Not that I'm not a trim athlete, but I'm a pretty healthy guy. And I said to myself, when I'm 80, I'm in my 70s, I'm early 70s, 71. And when I'm in my 80s, I want to have a healthy lifestyle. And I also found when I walk, I can think. I walk in a cemetery. Like you said about nature, you're out there in nature. We have a cemetery here it's all paved, so there's no holes or potholes or traffic. And most cemeteries, they're beautiful. I mean, they're manicured. The people take care of them. There's flowers and trees and birds. And so, for a little over an hour, I walk around this cemetery, and it's a peaceful place. It starts my day off in a peaceful way. And then one other thing I've learned to do is, and I learned this from an old professor when I was in university many years ago, and he would go around the racetrack, where the track people go, and he would read books while he was walking. And so I said, "Well, professor, I said, are you really reading?" He says, "Oh, absolutely, Pat." He says, "I wanted to." This is 40 years ago almost. He wanted to make sure he got stayed healthy, and he also wanted to make sure that he was a voracious reader. And he says, "It's a double hit for me. I get healthy, and I love the reading." So I do the same thing. I always have 3 or 4 articles when I'm walking, and I first start off just kind of just walking for 10 or 15 minutes and just kind of being out there, and then I have an article that I read. And I have a pen with me and a pad just in case I have a thought and I can capture it down. So in a year, I can read 300 articles. Not complicated. I wouldn't read stuff by like artificial intelligence or, scientific American things. But, there's lots of articles I need to read in my field that it's a twofer. I get healthy, I get mentally kind of feeling pretty good, and I feel like I've read an article that is meaningful to me. It makes me learn.
And why is this goal so important? You now described, okay, it's meaningful for the health, for the audit, for your work. What importance do those goals really have in overcoming procrastination?
Well, I think I said to myself, it's important to me to be healthy. And
Yeah.
I can't run anymore. I can't do this. I used to be a very good athlete when I was younger. I just can't do that anymore. So I talked to my doctor, and he says, you're not going to hurt yourself walking, right? I mean, doesn't happen very often. And this way you still maintain your health. And I said, okay, well, that's something, that's something. I tried swimming. I didn't like it. It's, I didn't want to, and it's a lot of stuff with swimming. You got to put a bathing suit on and drive someplace. And I said, if you have a lot of steps, procrastinators will fumble. right? So if I had to find my car keys and get in the car and put on a bathing suit and get in the swimming and dry myself, all those things. Now, a lot of people love to do that stuff. I just didn't. So I figured out, okay, let me see if something else. And the walking just comes easy to me.
And what I also notice is if I have this connection in my mind, for example, doing this podcast, I created already 2, 3 podcasts before this one. And the interesting part was they all faded out at some point. They all like stopped at some point because I didn't find guests. That was the reason. I didn't have enough time. Like all those excuses. Now in hindsight, I can very clearly see that. But in that moment, it seemed like a valid thing to let that thing that meant a lot to me actually drop. And I think that was because I didn't see that meaning. I didn't remember that why I started in the first place. Because it was not just about, I don't know, getting people to listen to this or getting famous or whatever. It was because this connection, the one-on-one with a person, and at the same time the learning, which is an important part of my life, just because I love it, are two very, very deeply ingrained things in my personality, and it just gives me joy. And I sort of made it a job, put myself a lot of high expectations on it, and forgot why I did it initially.
That's a great self-diagnostic. Yeah. I mean, at the heart of it, it sounds like you're a learner,
Yeah.
right? And as long as you can learn, you're pumped. You'll do what it needs to do to have that learning process take place. I don't know if you're familiar with the Gallup 2.0 Strength Finders.
I did that one, yeah.
Yeah. And one of my 5 is learner. And so
That's
when I
my
read
very first one, yeah.
and when I read the 5, I said, boy, this is really, and it's validated and it's got some real good academic research behind it. And it's a different orientation about building on your strengths. I mean, we talk about our weaknesses all the time. And, I do a lot of leadership development and deal with senior leaders in higher education. These are very accomplished, brilliant people, PhDs, all that kind of stuff. And oftentimes they are always focusing on what they can't do or what they're not doing well, as opposed to what they're doing well. And I'm trying to say that self-compassion and not Pollyannish, I mean, if there's certain things, tough things that you got to do, but there's so many strengths that most people bring to the table. And if you can build on your gifts and your strengths, you're going to move things forward as opposed to being self-critical and saying, if only I did this. But your learner piece is very important to you. And it would seem to me, I don't know why the 500,000, that sounds like a big number, but it seems to me, and I don't know you well, but we talked before, you're also about doing these podcasts that will help people think differently and feel differently and have a better life. That's a powerful purpose. That's a powerful purpose. And I hope that you get to that 500,000 if you stay true to how do you continue to learn and how do you keep on helping people, be better, human beings, as it were. Those two things are powerful.
Yeah. That's what I noticed. That's why I was like, okay, I need to start another one, but stay true to this purpose and this direction that I want to really go to. And one thing I think that comes with that as well is just understanding and knowing myself a lot better and setting the expectation right. The 500,000 was a random number earlier. This just came up. I didn't have actually a goal for that.
Okay.
But my goal is essentially just to keep on going for 1 year with bi-monthly podcasts. And that is for me a powerful thing because I just want to keep it going and running. And so then this thing comes up and is really important to me that I notice, okay, I achieve it, even though it seems like a small thing, like just every other week you do a podcast episode. And only for a year or two you want to go through this. I hear instantly the voice in my head, oh, but that's too small. Like, well, you're not achieving anything if that's the only goal you have for 1 year. So when people have that, what would you tell them?
Yeah, that's the negative nitties. I mean, we are so tough on ourselves. And I tell a lot of people, we would never treat a good friend the way we treat ourselves oftentimes.
Mm-hmm.
If us came with this dilemma that you have there, we'd show empathy, we would listen, we'd help strategize with them. But what we tend to do to ourselves is beat ourselves up. Well, I should have more energy. I should do I shouldn't feel this way. I should be motivated. All the shoulds. And man, when you start doing shoulds, you're in trouble, I think, personally. And
Why is that? Why is should such a powerful
it's
thing?
a criticism. Shoulda, woulda, could. I should be. Yeah. I think we talked the other day. The income taxes are my biggest dinosaur. I've been wrestling with that for 60 years. I hate doing my income taxes. I'm never going to like doing them ever. But my job is to get them done so I don't pay penalties. Right. So you don't have to like what you're doing. And the other thing to think through too is I think that the myth of motivation, we talked a little bit about this, in that a lot of procrastinators say, well, when I feel like it, it's a feeling, I'll do it. Well, a lot of times you ain't going to feel I'm never going to feel like I like to do my income tax. And what we know is if you do an action, not to write a book, write a draft of an outline would be a huge step forward in writing a book. And so it's just important to know that it's action creates energy and energy creates motivation. It's not like motivation. If athletes said, oh, I'm not motivated to play today, they'd be having losing seasons. They have these routines and these rituals, and they've really kind of taught us a lot in the research. What they have to do to keep their bodies in shape is 4 hours a day. Rigorous exercise. Well, how do you change it up? You do it with your buddies, you play music, you do different things, be able to do that so your body's in shape to be a really good athlete. So the motivation thing is, and then can I just go a little bit more in motivation?
Yeah, I actually want to highlight that point. What did you say? It was action creates motivation.
Energy. Yeah.
Creates energy, creates motivation.
Energy, motivation. And that's what I said earlier. Like if you start, about half the time you'll not finish it, you'll continue. You might do 10 more minutes, but that's a lot more than you had before. So, and I did that a lot of times. Oh, I don't feel like it. Well, Pat, you don't have to worry about feeling about it. Just do something. But like you said, the purposes are clear. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this boring task? I don't want to do this boring task. Well, I'm going to get paid. Okay, if I get paid, I can take care of my family. So if you can connecting the purposes, I think that can move people forward also.
Yeah, and so what was the part you wanted to say about motivation even further?
Well, that's a lot of mythology about motivation. And Baumeister in our country, he wrote a book called Motivation, and he's written a number of things. It's one of my favorite books. And he basically says that motivation is like a small battery, and it wears out quickly with use. It's not a big battery, a big battery. We have a small battery, and you've got to use it strategically. So when I heard that, I said, oh, wow. So you don't have this big bucket of motivation. And at least in our country, motivation is really a sports analogy, that we look at the sports and we look at the military for people who accomplish great things, but it's not the real world, right? Sports are not the real world. You got timeouts, you have 20-minute things, you have coaches everywhere, and that's not our life. So, but we use those models to compare ourselves. But he said, use it strategically. So usually for procrastinators, you got to use it at the beginning. Some people fade in the middle. So they start pretty good, then they start fading in the middle. That's when you got to say, let me stick to this thing for another half an hour and move it forward. And for me, a lot of times, it's the last mile that's the hardest. So I've gotten pretty good at starting things. Like when I've written a lot of books, I've written a lot of papers that have been published. That last mile, the last refinished copy, refined copy, is hard for me to do. So that's when I have to put my motivation and say, okay, just punch this out. I usually try to write with I have a thought partner also. And let's just punch this out. So I've learned to use my motivation resource very strategically, and people need it at different times.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not just, because we talked now a lot about starting, but it's not the only part that people need an extra boost of motivation or to get through. It can also be in the middle or towards the end.
50% of people in this country who start their PhDs, do all the coursework, do all the exams, never write the dissertation.
50%.
50%. So you're talking about millions of hours of time and things like that. Really smart and dedicated people. 50% of them do not write the dissertation because it's an onerous task. It's a horrible task, unless you make it intellectually kind of interesting, which I was smart enough to do that. But that's a lot of people. That's millions and millions of people that went through doctoral programs and just never completed their dissertation. So that's when they need their motivation. And that's where they could use thought partners. They could use, we talked a little bit about accountability partner. An accountability partner is a very important, thing to have, a strategy to have, especially with difficult tasks. And can I just explain how I see it? Because we have thought partners. Those are people you can bounce ideas off of, and they have a different perspective. They can add value. They can show our blind spots. But accountability partner is a pretty special person. It's someone you have a lot of respect for, someone you admire, or it can be a peer. It can be, it can be a mentor or coach. But you give your word to them that says, John, I'm going to finish this chapter by the end of the month. And John will hopefully say, well, that sounds like a good idea, Pat. Is there anything I can do to help you with that? Or give me a call if I can help you. But at the end of the month, we'll get together and we'll see how you're doing. Now, because of my affection and respect, for my accountability partner, tends to motivate me to finish that chapter, because I don't want to show up to John and say, John, I kind of messed up all month. And oh, well, it's just not how it works with an accountability partner that you respect and admire. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So I think that's such a common thing why the gym buddies exist. And I noticed also myself, I don't want to disappoint other people, but I'm okay
Right.
with disappointing myself
Right.
when I
Right.
set that goal. Yeah. It's a strange thing that's happening in our minds, I think, like the perception of what I see as important and what it's not. Or I think it's highly influenced by this emotion again, like, oh yeah, it's fine if I'm disappointing myself but not others. It feels strange, but there is some sort of
Oh,
emotion in there that feels okay with that.
yeah. No, I think that, well, we're social beings, right? And
Yeah.
we have networks and friends, and we have professional friends, and if you give your word, uh, most people, they'll try to keep it. They'll try to keep it. I joined a writers group after my first book. My first book was horrible. I mean, it was 450 pages, and I wrote it with two guys. It took forever. And I said, well, I've never worked with a writers group. And we did once a month, half a day. And some of the people were in my region. I live in the Philadelphia area in the United States. Were very well known. I mean, if not famous, they're very well known. And there were 6 of them. And there was something about that writing group. I said, I'm not going to show up in that writing group. And said, well, fellas and gals, I didn't do anything this month. It just wouldn't happen, because the respect and the support I got from these people here. And then we would give each other feedback on what the writing was. So it held us accountable as a group to kind of move through some tasks. And I wrote the second book was a lot easier than the first book, because I had support and I had accountability mechanism already built in, because I was not going to show up and say, yeah, I didn't do anything this month. And some of the people did. Some people said I had a rough month. My wife got ill. My husband got ill. My kids got ill. And we weren't critical about it, but it created a context and a culture of, when you come here, we're serious people, and we want to make sure we use each other's time really well.
Yeah, there has a instantly different energy with it. Like you're like,
Yep.
okay, I don't want to waste their time. I'm here to actually do proper work to the
Proper
best of
one.
my ability.
I like,
Everybody's there for that reason, and it creates like whenever you get there, at least that's how I perceive it now, is I want to be part of that energy, part of that group, and so you come with the same energy in that group.
absolutely. And I wanted their respect.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there was a couple of people there that, they'd written 5 or 6 books, and professors in colleges and pretty well known. And at some level, I wanted them to say, okay, Pat's a real person here, like you said, purpose. And so those dynamics help work that also. And I only did it for the one book. I wouldn't mind doing it again, but it was a very helpful experience for me. For some people, it might not work. And for some people, it might work really wonderfully. It all depends. There's so many things you can do. There's some strategies you can do. So if one doesn't work, you can try something else. And that's the notion of the book. There's at least 50 ideas in there that are practical, a lot of them research-based. So they've worked with a lot of people. And so if that doesn't work, then you do something else. And, the whole idea is to kind of move forward and serve your purposes at the end.
Oh yeah. I noticed that each of those aspects in your book, almost all of them had like a quotation of a person that I also knew. That was very interesting. But all of them were uh, had a foundation in research, and yet the way that you managed to write it was very clear and very practical in such a
Oh,
short abstract. And so I wanted to know, because there's so many different ideas in our book and so many things that must work for some person.
Yes.
What was one that was actually surprising for you to find helpful in procrastination that
Yeah,
you
that's
use?
that's a great question. And I appreciate you know, I- um, I'm not an academic. I'm not a full-time faculty member someplace, but a lot of my audience is, so I just don't wing a lot of ideas. I want to say, here's some practical ideas that are also supported by the research. But I really want to make sure that people don't get intimidated by 16 syllable words. And so when you read it, people get it. I mean, that's a big compliment to me that someone can read it and say, I got some ideas out of this. I didn't get overwhelmed with the complexity of it, because you make anything complex. So I appreciate the feedback on that. The biggest thing for me, and this is writing my dissertation, we talked about this, I think. What I was doing for a lot of years was reading my dissertation. I kept on doing reading and reading and reading and reading, which is a very sophisticated form of procrastination. I didn't know it at the time. Well, for that, I've read 6 books this week, Professor. I mean, I'm learning this stuff. And my chair said, Pat, we're year 7, because they only give you 7 years, at least in our university. And he said, I haven't seen too much written material from you, and I can give you a 1-year extension, but if I don't see at least 3 chapters out of, I think it was 7, you're going to have to leave. And I'm saying, what? I mean, wow. And he didn't do it in a critical way. He was just saying, we got a lot of doctoral students here. It takes a lot of time and effort to work with them. And if you can't produce something, after 7 years, and so I said, okay. And then what I did was I went and I asked a lot of colleagues who had finished their dissertation, what is it that you did? How did you do it? I mean, you're not much smarter than I am. I mean, and the 3 things I came up with, and we had talked about this before, but the big thing for me was each one of them had a reward system. Okay? And they had a way of rewarding their success. After each chapter, I had one person that I talked to, and he was a big golfer, and he would, after each chapter of the 6 or 7 in his dissertation, he would take a long golfing weekend someplace beautiful, like California and Florida, and he would just love the idea. Oftentimes, if you have a reward, the anticipation of the reward is much better than the experience. And it motivated him to knock off a chapter. I'm going to go to Puerto Rico, and I'm going to play golf. I'm going to go to Palm Springs and play golf. And it motivated him. And I said, wow, rewards, really? And the other people had other things that they did, long weekends. And I resisted that, because I said to myself, the nutty self, oh, I should be more disciplined than that. And I should be more mature than that. I should. And all 3 of them said, Pat, don't be silly. Rewards really work. And so I said, okay, what is it that I like to do? And let me make sure that I can do this in chewable chunks. So the nice thing about a dissertation, it's chapter by chapter by chapter. And there's an onerous task, but you get feedback after every chapter, you refine it, and then you keep things moving. So I had a reward map for different kinds of experiences that after each chapter, I would reward myself.
That's so good, to appreciate and sort of acknowledge the things that you actually achieved. Because I feel like that's in so many clients that I have, come to me, and I notice just continuously this pattern of denying the wins that they've made and putting them on a pedestal, the negative things about themselves. What does that have to do with procrastination?
Well, I think that you have to make your progress visible. And that was the other thing I learned from those people. They said, you got to make sure that your progress is visible. So that's why my agenda, I only have 6 things on my agenda every day. I used to have 10. And then a buddy of mine, I used to be exhausted at the end of the day and get to 8 and feel like I failed. And I'm talking to Tom, and I'm saying, oh, geez, something wrong with me. I'm not getting enough done. He says, why would you have 10 things to do every day that are important? I said, don't you? And he says, I have 5. I said, really? And he's a lot more successful than I was. I said, tell me about that. He says, just have 5. And it changed my professional life. So I try to do 6 a day. And like I said, it's on a bright yellow piece of paper, and I score it out, and I feel really good when I score something out. And I start off the day after my 10,000 steps. That's an agenda item. I score that out, and then I do my other things. So making your progress visible in any way you can. In our country, we have something called the United Way, which is a big, big, big charity organization that does great work. and they have a symbol of a thermometer, kind of a big bowl, and then with the chimney, I guess. And then and it's on the road, signs everywhere. And so you can say, oh, the charity to help the homeless, we want to have $1 million and we're at 300,000. When you pass it 2 weeks later and they're at 350,000. So you see it
Oh,
growing and growing,
wow.
and that motivates people. Hey, they only need $200,000 more. Let's see if we can help out. So it's a very powerful symbol that's used across this country.
And how do you use, apart from maybe the agenda, use this making progress visible in other ways? Or what would you suggest to other people would be helpful?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I do is this is a stack of Post-its. I don't know if you can see. There we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I use those when I'm doing my writing and my research. And I do 30-minute chunks at a time. I used to be able to do an hour at a time, but as I'm getting older, it doesn't work that way. Instead of me saying, oh, I should be able to do it for an hour, I said, after about a half an hour, I get kind of mentally tired. So I take a 10-minute break. And I have 10 of these things on a board across my desk. And I learned this from a colleague. And after every 30 minutes, my phone goes off ding. I stand up, come around my desk to the whiteboard, and I take one of these things here and I rip it up. Oh my God, you're good. So as we go, I start off with 10 of these things. And as the day goes by, there's less and less Post-its. My motivation or my energy gets pretty excited because now I only have 2 more to go. I kind of close the gap. So that's another way I make my progress visible.
So you actually physically get up and rip it up. I could even hear it. That's so nice. The sound of, yes, I made it.
I made it. And this guy
Yeah.
I learned from, he used a bigger one and he crumpled it up and threw it in the trash bin. And I said, that works for you, Jerry? He says, absolutely. I love it. Energy is just standing up, physical. You're crossing, you've accomplished something. You're tearing it up and you're throwing it away. He says, I feel like I hit a home run every time I do that. And he was just a very, very productive person. Jerry Seinfeld is a pretty famous comedian in our country. He's got something called the calendar technique. And he has a big calendar in his office. And he says, I spend 30 minutes to an hour writing jokes every day. And then he crosses off the day. And he says just that visual thing has enabled him to, I think I'm frozen here. Okay. Just of crossing those days off. I don't think he's missed a day in like 15 years.
That
So
is incredible. Yeah.
the discipline of marking the moment, marking the accomplishment. And like you said before, with your coaching clients, we spend so much time talking about what we're not good at versus neutralizing. That's why I like the Gallup, the Strength Finder. You build on your strengths and you try to neutralize your areas of needed development or get help with those things. But if you're playing to that weakness all the time, you're not going to be a very successful leader. So playing to your strengths is really, really important. And finding ways to show your accomplishments and really enjoying the rewards make you feel like, hey, I really earned this, and I'm moving my purposes forward.
And how does mindfulness play into all of that? That is such an important part in your book as well. Why?
Well, that's being aware, a little bit like the meditation. It's being kind of aware of what you're thinking and feeling in the moment. And so if you're feeling a little anxious, and this is what a lot of psychologists tell you, instead of it just kind of bouncing around, you say, I'm feeling anxious right now. Or I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. You name it. I call it naming the ghost, right? You name the ghost. Okay, well, I'm anxious. Okay, what can I do to lessen the anxiety? What can I do to move something forward? Do I need to take a break? It's okay to take breaks. What you want to stay away from is social media. Not that I'm against social media, but I mean, I do my own investments in stocks, and I have a discipline. In the morning I check it, in the afternoon I check it. For a while there, I was doing it every hour because it's exciting. Oh my God, I made $400. Oh no, I just lost $400. It was nutty, So you say, have some discipline. Check it in the morning, check it in the afternoon, and leave it alone, because you could be going on social media during one of your breaks. So we say, if you take a 10-minute break, stretch a little bit, have a cup of coffee, do something different, come back. But if you start getting in social media, you could find yourself throwing panda bears in China, an hour and a half later. You say, boy, that was interesting. And then your day is gone. So, and the social media I have a little issue with this because it's been designed to be addictive. And it's really, and especially these young people growing up are smarter, they're smarter than I am, but they're on these machines all the time. And I'm sure that's doing something. I mean, I'm not a medical biologist, but there is there's a book called Irresistible that came out in, I think, 2019.
Yeah.
And I read that. I just said, oh my Lord, these things have been designed for us to just to be addicted. And so it takes some real discipline to stay away from that.
And how do you, because I think that's such a big topic today, also when it comes to procrastination, sometimes you even connect procrastination with being on social media. You procrastinate when you're on social media. How do you notice? Because we have quite a gap, and I know all the backgrounds about how they're being designed. It's so interesting to me to know that also from Nia Yao with the book Irresistible.
Yeah,
But how do you see that? What role does social media right now or today's society play in procrastination? Have you
well,
experienced that?
I think it plays a big role. What I try to do with my iPhone is I'm not against, I love technology, right? Is I put it in another room for an hour at least. And then what happens in our minds, people say, oh my God, there could be an emergency. I mean, but every 6 million years, there's an emergency. Are you kidding me? I mean, it just doesn't happen. But that's the thing we do to ourselves. Oh my God, if my mom called and she's sick in the hospital, well, after an hour, they'll call you again. I mean, come on. And moving this into another room for people, and I've done a lot of research on this, excuse me, is creates a lot of anxiety for people. But if you can put it away, because distractions are really bad for procrastinators. If there's music playing, now some people love to have music or they can't work. I mean, I get that too. But if there's distractions, and this is one of the great distraction machines ever created, procrastinators can get distracted and not get focused. And I forget how to pronounce his name. He talks about that. There's a whole notion around traction and distraction and things like that, that it's so easy to be distracted. It takes some real discipline to have some structures in place so that you can focus on what you want to do.
Yeah, even with just with having phones on the table or in sight or even on you in pockets reduces your ability to stay concentrated.
Absolutely.
Just to have it around, your mind wanders off to it because it has so much pull to it that we might get a notification, we might get a call. And this creates just the possibility that this might happen creates this little spike in dopamine. That's the
Sure.
thing that creates this pull towards it. Because whenever we get a notification or message, we get a little bit of dopamine. It's like, oh, maybe it was important. Maybe it's somebody is asking for me. It could be any small thing, and that creates this anticipation, which is essentially a little bit of release of dopamine.
Absolutely. The dinging when it could be a good
Yes.
ding. Oh, I'm important. Something's happening. It's not even fruitcake. I had an executive at one of my teaching things, and he came in and he was looking at his iPhone and he said there was no emails from his office. He said, well, Pat, I got to go out and check out things and make a long story short. They were doing fine without him, right? But, well, my apologies. I don't know if I what you said today or not. I apologize. So he went out for 15 minutes saying, what's going on? And everything's going on. I said, Bob, everything's fine. I mean, he was addicted to being the guy, right? How come I don't have 15 emails solving problems? And so that was the lesson that we went through with the class. How do we make sure that we don't do that as leaders? And so to be important, to be needed, or whatever it is, what's interesting? Oh my God, a ding. What does that ding mean? So I always turn off the dings on my computer so I'm not hearing them throughout the day.
That brings me to the point. I think the quote that I mentioned earlier was about almost choosing to be busy. But is that a choice, or are we almost addicted to just being busy all the time?
One of the quotes I have in my office, and I put these quotes around because other people have used them, and it's Kierkegaard. He says, busyness is a decision. And that's a pretty humbling quote. And I have that right in front of me most of the time because there's something about being busy. You feel like you're being full and you're doing stuff, but are you being productive? What's the outcome of the busyness? And we give a lot of credit for people who are busy. Boy, that Patty's a busy guy. And he works hard. busy, 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 rushing from one meeting to another. I tell a lot of presidents, I said, walk to your meetings, first of all, because if you walk, guess what? People say, hey, Mr. President, Madam President, how you doing today? So if you're rushing, they're not going to say, how you doing? They go, oh, there goes the president again. They're busy. So busyness, we get a lot of credit for being busy. I'm not sure they're very, very productive. I apologize that I'm coughing so much. I feel like I've got allergies or something.
Do you need to get something to drink?
Yeah, let
Do
me
you
do
have?
that. Would that be
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, of course.
That'd be great. All right, thanks for that. Sorry about that.
No worry. Are you feeling better now?
Yeah, just something in me. I don't feel like I'm clogged up or anything, just that something's going on in my chest. I'll take a look at you.
Yeah, but feel free to drink in the meantime or get anything
you.
you need.
Thank you very
Of
much.
course. Yeah. All right. I do have to admit I forgot where you were just before.
Probably so did I a
It,
little bit.
okay. If not, it's fine. I'll have another point I wanted to ask you about. Which is if I now tried a lot of the tools that you mentioned of like have chewable chunks, have maybe the time blocks for 30 minutes. But I still notice in the meantime, in the breaks, maybe I'm on social media. I notice even if I do that for like 3-4 days, it works well, and I just go back into the old habits. One day wake up and take the phone in the first thing, and then I, sleep in a bit longer, or it just fades out. Like I think
Yeah,
that at least for me, that's a normal thing that happens over and over again. Like, I'm super consistent for like a week, and then it just fades out, and for the next 3 weeks, I'm just out of the
yeah,
mood. What to
yeah.
do
No,
then, man?
yeah. I think you just got to start again. You don't being self-critical, and there's a lot of research that doesn't help. No research out there that says beating yourself up is going to make you more productive. And that's one of the things we do, though. We do it. I mean, so it's a little self-compassion. Okay. I don't know if there's a book or a theory out there, and I've heard it a couple times, says no 0 days. And the whole concept is there, like, we have a day we just don't get much done. Can you get something little done? Right? So you don't have a 0 day. You can feel, okay, I've got something accomplished. And I think that's a nice little thought that you got something accomplished. I think too, the thing that is important for people, there's a book called The Gap and the Gain. And I think it's a powerful book. And it talks about we're always looking back on what the gap is versus what we've done. And the gap is always there, right? I mean, the gap is always there. And instead of saying, hey, I wrote 3 pages, next day I wrote a page and a half. I mean, it's that building on what you're doing and not looking at what you didn't do. And I think it's a powerful notion that the gap is there and it'll bring you down. But if you can just talk about what your gains are, whether that be walking every day or spending more time doing something or doing some writing or doing some research, I think that the gap and the gain is a very powerful way of thinking. I'm looking at the gains, not my gap. And that's not easy to do. So if you have a couple of weeks where you kind of, fall apart, you do other things, starting again, it's a new day, new game. Let's see what I can accomplish. That's meaningful for me. And that's where the purpose, you brought it up a number of times. The purpose is key, is I want to be a learner. I want to help people have better lives. That can be a very powerful motivator. The other
And
thing, I'm sorry, go ahead.
if you want to extend on that, please go ahead.
Well, I don't know if it just popped in my head. There's a guy named Mark Twain in our country that wrote a lot of books and quite a character. And he had something about if you have 2 frogs to eat the big one first. And, you hear that, go, oh, okay. Procrastinators will never do that. Procrastinators will never take the big frog, the overwhelming task, and eat it. But they might take the smaller frog or the smaller task, chewable chunks, 30-minute increments or 10-minute increments, build rewards in there, make it a social activity. I mean, there's lots of little things you can do and eat that small frog or finish that task. So if I finish that task or eat that small frog, now all of a sudden I've got accomplishments. I've got strategies that work. I have confidence. I mean, what confidence is that a belief that you're going to be successful. It's not a bucket in your back pocket. So I've eaten the small frog or the small task, I have lots of good stuff now to tackle the big frog. And for him, I think it was a misdirection. Now he's a smarter guy than I was, but I heard that for years and tried to tackle the toughest, hardest thing. And then the rest of your day, it's different. Procrastinators will not do that. But if they get the small task done, that can then set them up for success for the larger task.
That's interesting. I also heard eat the frog first or the difficult task at first, but that is a little twist on that. Eat the frog first that is a little smaller or that makes you quickly get some gains in positive reinforcement.
I had a client about 3 years ago who I knew, and he just said, we're having problems. And I'm not a sales guy. He says, our sales department, we're not producing. Do you think you come in and talk to us? And I said, sure. Come in. And I talked to a few of the salespeople, and what they did was they took the toughest clients they had first thing in the morning at 8:30, made these cold calls. And then they had a whole list of 15 or 20 people. And I said to the guy, I said, Sam, why would you take the most difficult clients? He says, oh, our theory is you beat them up and you get them going and the rest of the day is easier. And I said, well, let me give you a suggestion. He says, all right. And he says, why don't you take the first 3 calls or easy hits? And then who those people are, like this person comes every day or every week, they buy something for us. So let's give them a call and let's see what happens. And they did it for a month. They did it for a week and had a lot of success. They did it for a month. And then we kind of debriefed on what worked. They found that and a lot of these salesmen are very disciplined, tough-minded folks. But the fact that they had 2 or 3 victories early in the morning created a whole different context for them. And it gave them more enthusiasm to go after the tougher clients. So, there's different myths that we have. You try something different and you can kind of shift perspective. Do something small. It's an accomplishment. You'll feel better about yourself. You'll feel successful. You might even learn something and then see if you can do something more different.
That is great. I realize now also for me, meditation is the first thing in the morning. And when I've take that off, I mean, it's not questioned by now. Like I've done that for years.
Part
So
of your,
it's part of me. Like I would say I am a meditator, which is very powerful, right?
that's hard. That's powerful.
Yeah. And then the next thing is already first of all, I'm in a clear state of mind when I'm getting out of this. And second, I've already gone through the difficult task of going through my mind, letting go of all the thoughts that are not serving me or that distracting or that want to get me into a negative state or whatever. And it feels like quite often the more difficult the meditation or maybe even, I don't know, painful because my back hurts or whatever, if I get through that, then all the other tasks afterwards are a little bit easier. But meditation itself is like a no-brainer. It's already the thing that I do. And it
Yep.
feels already like an easy thing for me by now, meditation. And so that's like a really nice thing to set me up for feeling good the rest of the day, or even just making the bed, or just like those very simple things help to get you in a good state of mind for the other
Absolutely.
things.
So this habit that you've created
Yeah.
is a part of who you are.
Yeah.
It just sets up the context for you for the rest of the day, whether it's just you go out and have a good time and goof off with friends, or to do some work and do podcasts or do the homework you need to do. But it's a nice way to start off the day. Like my 10,000 steps is one of the first things that I do. I start off the day and I feel healthier and mentally more. I mean, it's just kind of part of it. Now, when I'm on the road, it's harder. I usually do somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 steps, but I don't beat myself up. So I'm not going to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning walking around the city, right? I mean, I'm just not going to do that. But I can walk in the hallways, go to the sports club, walk around the block, and try to be in a safe place, to say the least. But, for a long time, I said, oh, geez, I'm only getting 5,000 on the road. Well, that's probably all I'm going to be able to do, and that's fine. But when I'm home, it's 10,000 steps a day.
And now, if there's a listener now who, I just create a listener, which is probably myself, who beats them up usually between not doing enough when the expectations be high. I'm not achieving that. And I have this idea that I failed so many times in the
Yeah.
past, and I didn't accomplish the thing that I set myself out to do. And this feels just like another start, and it feels so exhausting. And I don't want to start over again, knowing that I will fail with whatever task might be like an essay for university, might it be the task for a job, or the taxes, or whatever thing there is that I'm procrastinating about. What would be the two key elements that you would tell me uh, that would make the biggest shift for me dealing better with procrastination?
I just do something simple that feels meaningful and short. I mean, if it's 10 minutes, that's a victory going in the right direction. That can create some real momentum. And just making sure that you know what you're trying to serve. We've talked about this a number of times. What's the purpose I'm trying to serve? You're not going to do 6 podcasts in a day. Probably not, right? You can do one really good one. And there's a lot of work behind the scenes. The other thing, too, is being realistic. I don't think we're very realistic. We talked a little bit earlier about the aspirational piece.
Yeah.
It's really good to have thought partners. I went to my doctor about a year ago, and I had gained some weight during COVID. I said, hey, doc, I got to lose 10 pounds this month. And he knows me for 20 years. He says, don't be ridiculous. I said, what? I can do that. He says, you can't do that. It took you 6 months to get this extra weight on. So we're going to design a process. So you're going to do 1 pound a week. I said, a pound a week? Man, doesn't sound like a lot. He says, 1 pound a week. It's doable. You're going to cut a few things out of your diet because, I ate junk food during the COVID and things like that. Going to get a little bit more exercise and different kinds of exercise. And in 3 months, you'll be down 10 pounds. I said, you'll feel better. It won't be onerous. And he was exactly right. In 3 months, I lost 12 pounds. And, I felt better. But it was his reality check that says, it took you a long time to get this fat. You're not going to knock it off in a month. Don't be silly. I mean, that's not necessary. Let's change the lifestyle and your decisions so that you can be a healthier person over time. So just having a reality check. A lot of times people say, well, this project, that's it. I mean, I do a lot of strategic planning and people don't have very good ideas about how hard it is to move things forward. So you have to ask other universities or other campuses or other leaders, how long did it take you? Oh, it took you 3 years. We thought it was just going to take us 6 months. Well, that's a reality check, so getting reality checked and not getting your buddies saying, oh, Julian, you're fine. You're nothing wrong. Oh, you're going to do that. And you need someone a little bit of a critical edge that says, I don't think that's a very realistic goal. I think I would consider doing this instead. So it gives you a choice point. And I just want to talk a little bit about, there's a guy who wrote a book called The Paradox of Choice.
Barry Schwartz.
Yeah. And it's a simple little book. He's not too far from us in Swarthmore. It's about a 40-minute ride from me. It's so powerful that, we this FOMO, the fear of missing out, and we want to do this and this and this and this and this, choices. And he said basically 3 choices, 3 different opportunities is all you need. And yet in America, it's the more. And all you need is 3. And 3 is enough. I mean, and there's another an Indian professor from University of Penn who's done some of the parallel research, a different level of play. And she said the same thing. We have all these opportunities, all these choices, and we don't know how to begin. So if you can narrow it down to 3, there's probably a good chance that you'll pick the right one and you'll kind of move forward. So I thought those kind of notions are kind of counterintuitive. The paradox,
Yeah.
don't we want a lot of choices? Yeah, we like them, but it doesn't help us.
That's interesting. Yeah, that kind of bias that we have, like, oh, the more the better, the more choices the better. But it's actually paradoxical that, no, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's an amount of choice we probably need to be
Yes.
good and healthy and to be able to actually have some sort of freedom. But too many choices create a little paralysis in us. We can't decide.
Absolutely. Paralysis analysis. I have a buddy of mine that went to buy a car about 2-3 years ago. And because there's so much information on before it used to be Consumer Report, you used to read, the Ford GTO, or you have to wait for a month to get it. No, nowadays, everything's at your fingertips. And he's a great guy, but he's a little bit of a nut, because he loves data and facts. And academia in the United States, I mean, they just love data. And they can't have enough of it. And they get buried in analysis paralysis. They can't move. And he took a year. I mean, he kept on saying, this report's coming out, and I can check this, and and the EV, and the year passed. I mean, they had a new car year came out. And his wife said, Tom, back away. I'm buying the car. And she did that day. She went out and just bought the car. So you can get caught, in this analysis paralysis because it's so interesting, and we're and how do we want to do it right and things like that. And but after a year, she said, "I'm tired of this. Get out of the way. I'm buying the car." And she bought the car, and it's a great car. So you know, that's where you have to have reality. I think you just have to have reality check. That's where mentors and coaches and allies and accountability partners, we call it the posse. If you don't have a posse when you're doing a tough task, it's just going to be hard. But if you have a coach or you have a peer that can be a reality person or a mentor, you can say, Mary, how did you do this? And this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? All those people can be very helpful in moving the ball forward. You don't have to do it by yourself. And that's a big thing.
What I have quite often is that people at first, my clients just have at first just to tell me their ideas, tell me what they really want to do.
Mhm.
And that quite often is already really, oh, wait, you're not judging me or tell me what I should do or should not do. No, I'm just listening, first of all, what you want. And that creates then the space quite often to go deep and, okay, what do I actually want? Do I think it is realistic, or is it just another should based on what my parents told me, what I perceive from society, what I should be doing now, what looks good as a status thing, and just like giving that space to
Right.
think about it just without the judgment, because quite often in procrastination, in the things that we should do in our expectations, there's a lot of judgment in there, which I think is just harmful based on it makes us feel bad so quickly. And
Okay.
we have this like negativity bias that we tend to overestimate the things that the negative things as more important. And the same way, the stuff that is bad about ourselves. Oh, I'm not good at pushing myself to do that. I'm not good at sports. I'm not good at that. We can usually quite quickly write down a list of 20 items that we are bad at.
Yeah, exactly.
Ask that with 20 items that you're good at, and people start to struggle.
Oh yeah, it's a counterintuitive way of thinking, and yet it's the best way to think, right? To talk about what you didn't do versus what you have accomplished, and then what you're doing with it's very powerful. A lot of the leaders I deal with, just listening to them, and I call it unpacking your thinking. And I said two things. We say, think out loud for me, and that's it sounds like you do with your coaching clients. And a lot of times they don't think out loud; they keep it all in their heads. And I say, oh, okay, and you're doing a very good job. You're a very good listener, by the way, but it's just to feel heard is a very powerful experience for people. And then if I'm dealing with a client that is, and I got taught this by a woman named Claire, who's a very creative person, and she taught me mind mapping, which is like 20 years ago. And when we were talking, she would do these mind maps when we were talking, these squiggles and these circles and these arrows, and she captured so much, and it made my thinking visible. So sometimes when I'm dealing with senior leaders, we have a whiteboard or a flip chart or something like that, not a computer screen. I mean, you gotta, and I said, well, help me understand what the challenge is here. And I'm not an artist at all. It's just stick figures and symbols. And what happens, you just kind of map out what their thinking is. And it's like a gift. Oh my Lord, that's what's been bouncing around my head. And it doesn't take days. It takes an hour or so. And then you can bring other people in and say, okay, here's the map in my head that I'm thinking about this challenge or this opportunity. And then people will say, well, how about this? Because they can see something, right? Not all of us are auditory learners. I'm a very visual learner. And just this little simple little map, you can add value by bringing other people in and then solving some pretty complex things or, looking at some really good opportunities. So thinking out loud or making your thinking visible is really helpful. But the gift that you give a lot of your coaching clients is to feel listened to. I think that's powerful stuff.
And especially like this making things visible in the context of procrastination helped me so much to understand how much, forgive me the wording, bullshit I'm thinking about. And
Oh, yeah.
unrealistic goals, unrealistic expectations, unrealistic just feelings that I have around this. So one thing was essentially with this podcast that I was thinking about for about, what is it, a year or something with that idea. I was like, okay, I'm going to do that at some point. And having just that on my mind, I'm waiting for the right timing. I'm waiting for the thing that I have enough time to do this, for feeling in the mood, for having the motivation. And at some point I was just thinking, oh, my life would be so much better if I would just like do a regular workout routine and have this podcast. And I think I was probably repeating that a couple of times to my girlfriend at that time. And then at some point she was just like, Julian, if you think that will increase and improve your life, just do it.
Just do it.
There's so much nonsense and so much confusion in my head, at least I can only speak about my head, in my
Sure.
head about what things I should be doing, what things consequences will be there. And I have no idea what the future will hold, right? And so now that I have started this, it gives me so much clarity and moves me so much more forward of like, what is actually possible? What is realistic? And I think that gives so much clarity, what you said in the beginning. Also with willpower, was that action creates energy, creates the motivation to do something. And the threshold of holding us back, of actually getting into some movement, momentum, is probably the biggest thing that I discovered for myself that is
Right.
holding me back. Just getting into movement, whatever
It's
small thing it is.
small thing it is. Small thing it is. And this may be a little bit of a tangent, but let me just talk about my income tax, because I hate
Yes,
it.
please.
I mean, everyone hates their income tax. I get it, but I get overwhelmed with details. So if I have to do an invoice for clients, I'm on the road for 3 weeks. I might have 4 different clients in San Francisco and Alabama and Florida. One's a nonprofit, one's GE, and they have different rules and regulations. There's mileage, there's hotels, and I got it all in a big pouch. And I'll look at that pouch for 2 weeks before I do an invoice. People say, Pat, you get paid if you do the invoice. Well, it doesn't matter. It gets so intimidating to me, all these little receipts and things like that, and I'm still a paper guy. It becomes intimidating. So it's counterintuitive. Well, you do your invoice, you get paid. Well, I've had invoices that are 3 months old, and all the other things in my life, I'm very productive and very competent and very accomplished, but not around details. And so then I have to have these structures that, like I said, the temptation bundling, or I'll watch sports while I'm doing my invoicing, or I'm doing my income tax at 15-minute increments. I love sports. It takes me away. It takes a lot longer to do the invoicing or the income tax, but I get it done. And that's what's important. Is you get it done. This thing about deadlines, we're very bad at estimating how long and how hard something's going to be. But I can watch sports and say, oh, hey, they just scored another goal. Oh, it's exciting. And come back and do 10 minutes. And it takes a lot longer, but I get it done. And that's what those structures, instead of me saying I shouldn't feel overwhelmed with income tax. Well, I've felt overwhelmed for 50 years. So let me just deal with the overwhelm in some kind of constructive way.
Oh, that's powerful. So you don't want to. I think that was also said in Neil's book, Indistractable. It's less about dealing with the task and more about the emotion around the task.
And not judging myself. And you should be able to sit down for 7 hours and do your income tax. Well, that's never happened in 50 years. That should, when you hear the shoulds, that should be a warning bell. Okay, why am I shoulding myself? And what can I do to, in this mode, I sort of mindfulness, what's going on with me? And then there's just something I can do to move forward. And if you can connect it, I know I'm beating that to death a little bit, the purpose. What am I doing this for? If I do the invoices, I get paid and I can do nice things with my life, or I can give to charities, or I can do this, I can do that. So all those little things are helpful to move you forward. And it's the only area I think in my professional life where I do any kind of procrastination is invoices and income tax. The rest of it, very productive. I work hard. I love working. Very published, well published. You would think, why is a procrastinator write 12 books and 50 published articles? How is it possible? Well, it is that. You can be a productive procrastinator, but if you beat yourself up, it doesn't help too much. We did it. We're mean to ourselves. We're mean to our parents, our family, all this kind of stuff. You should do this, you should do that. So figure your purpose out. There's a nice little design in the book called The 80th Birthday, and it's an adaptation, from different kinds of designs. But I use it with a lot of clients. And the whole notion is imagine you're 80 years old and I'm interviewing you. You're not interviewing me about the life you've lived. And there's certain questions in the book that, what are you most proud of? What's one thing you wish you would have done? What's the contribution you made? And it just gets people thinking in a different way. And at 80, you're still healthy and you're still mentally acuity, and you still have time left. And a lot of people feel like, golly, I've accomplished a lot more than I ever imagined. And we also ask a tough question of what's a regret you have? And someone will say, well, I never lived overseas. I always wanted to live overseas. Oh, okay. Well, you still have time to do something like that. So it's a nice little design in the book. If you do it with a thought partner, it takes maybe 20, 30 minutes, and it can give you that sense of purpose and meaning, kind of reveal for you not you particularly, Julian, but other people, what's important to them. And
Also
that,
me.
yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful little design, and
Yeah.
but it's, yeah, it's the self-compassion. And listen, I'm not a fluffy guy, I'm a pretty hard-nosed professional. And what I've learned over these years is beating yourself up, it doesn't help much. And yet we're taught that that's how you achieve excellence. And self-compassion works. When you can say, I dropped the ball yesterday, let's see if I can turn it around today.
Yeah. How do you actually apply it? Because it's a uh, word that's been throwing around recently, at least a lot. How do you actually do it? How do you do self-compassion?
I think the mindfulness comes in, what's going on for me,
Yeah.
why I'm being critical. You look at you've done 20 podcasts already. That's a lot of podcasts, a lot of time, effort, energy, patience, listening. So focusing on, what you've accomplished and not what you haven't done, I think is real important. So being mindful, and you sounds like you have this meditation practice. I don't do it as well as you do. I do it once in a while. I do some breathing exercises too sometimes that get me some kind of energy and things like that. So these little things that can kind of keep me going on the track and serving the purposes that are important to me. I don't know if I answered the question. Did I?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great starting point to look further into how do you do self-compassion was the idea. And it starts off by being aware, I think,
Okay.
at least from my perception, being aware that you're beating yourself up. Every little thought that you have, at least in my perception, is creating a feeling with it. And the thing is, you can ask yourself the question, why am I failing all the time?
Right. Right. Wow. Yeah.
Right? And your brain will come up with answers.
A lot to You're not too smart. You're not motivated. Oh, absolutely.
Exactly. And you can ask yourself the question, how can I don't know, accomplish this thing tomorrow realistically?
How can
And
I
then
move?
your brain will come up with answers.
Absolutely. Let your brain be your friend, not your enemy.
Yes.
Right.
So,
That's what it's supposed to be there for, right? How do
yes.
you get this? Naming the feeling. I'm feeling anxious. Okay, well, what can I do to lessen my anxiety? Not to deny it, not to escape it. What can I do to lessen the impact of it so I can move forward? And that's when the strategy can come in. Chewable chunks, do it with a friend. I mean, whatever those things are, it's a toolbox. It's a toolbox that you can use. It's just not one toolbox, or one tool, as it were.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to see the brain then as literally a tool that you can, depending on what you input, you'll get out. Similar, what you have now with the AI chatbots. If you ask a really good question, you get a really good and neat
Yeah.
answer that you want. And so the same way, when you ask your brain or yourself, in a sense, the question, "Hey, how can I feel better tomorrow? What are things that make me feel good? What are things that I can get a little bit better at?" Your brain will come up with answers.
I'll come up with an answer.
And
Yep.
so sometimes it's about asking better questions to myself that will
Yep.
lead to better answers. Yeah.
There's two books I'm just in the middle of reading. One is called A Beautiful Question, and the other one is Questions Are the Answer. And I've started, because of my brain works. I mean, I can get about halfway through, and then I start another book. That's just the way my mind works. And, I don't write one thing at a time. I usually have 3 or 4 writing projects, but I've also written 50 published articles. So it works, right? Might not look real sophisticated or effective, but obviously works. But one of the themes I came away with was, and I'm in a business with a lot of smart people, and there's two kind of questions. There's more than two kind, but there's two big categories. One is questions of curiosity. help me understand. I'm assuming with your coaching clients, you're doing a lot of that. Help me understand, right?
Yes.
Or questions of criticism, which is, what do you mean? You know what I mean? It's got that edge to it. And in academia, that's the one that's rewarded because it's supposed to be rigorous and we're supposed to be disciplined. And so now I'm much more aware when I'm talking to people, are they asking questions of curiosity, right? Help me understand. Can you explain this? Versus questions of, you mean to tell me? You can pick that up. And I can diagnose a group in half an hour of executives, pretty high powered people by the questions. And if it's critical, they're not going to move very far. They'll never build a great team. But if they're questions of curiosity, and that means they're learners, and then they can really kind of achieve great things. Does that make sense at all?
I think totally. So, which is impressive, the thing that you can assess an executive based on the questions that
Absolutely.
they ask. That is really, really powerful. And it really shows this idea that there is a curious idea behind the question. And the interesting thing, at least when it comes to me and coaching clients, and also when I talk about communication, is when you want another person to be open for your ideas and to be open for whatever you bring to the table, ask them open, curious questions. Because
Right.
I notice for myself, whenever somebody seems curious about me and who I am and what I want to do, I open up.
Yeah.
I also ask them eventually, hey, what are your plans? What are
Well,
your ideas? And so that creates a completely open environment where we can talk about ideas, where we can help each other out, where like a contribution, a collaboration happens rather than
Right.
I know things better than you and you should have adjusted that. Then this person probably will come back at, yeah, and your mistake is this and you didn't do this well.
Yeah. It happens a lot.
Exactly.
It happens a lot. I think that enables me to understand the culture of a team or a group very quickly.
Yeah.
When I have to excuse myself with the cat came down from outside. Anytime I'm on Zoom, all of a sudden she's in love with me and wants to be pet. So I'm gonna remove her.
I always have this question to people, which is, what is something that you wish other people would know more about you, or now in this case, maybe the work of procrastination, that, people have an understanding of it, but you have a very deep sense of this right now. So what is something that people should be more aware of on the topic of procrastination?
I think it's there's lots of tools and strategies and practices that you can use to not get caught in the trap of procrastination. There's hope, right? And it's not hopeless. It's not hope that's, everything's going to be fine and hunky dory. There's just a lot of things that work to help you move forward and not to be critical of yourself. It just doesn't help. It just doesn't help.
Not That's so good. You said in the middle of the podcast already. No scientific research has shown that self-criticism will help you in
Yep.
any way. And I had just today, this morning before our call, a very impactful session, understanding that a person was repeating over and over again, oh, when I'm sitting alone, doing nothing, not meeting up with people, I feel like I'm wasting time. I'm not being productive. I'm not achieving anything.
Yeah. Wow.
And that is such a common feeling.
Yep.
I have it many, many times that just the thought comes up, oh, I'm wasting my time. I'm not doing anything. And this is so in our mind at the moment that we always need to do and produce in order to, I don't know, be valuable or to be enough, to be good enough. And I feel like sometimes that is the core of my procrastination, that just I just want to do something so I don't have the feeling of I'm not good enough.
Yeah, I think that's very powerful and very honest. And it's something I'm probably guilty of too. I'm a pretty productive person. I want to be productive to the day I die. I'm not really good at relaxing. I'm trying to learn how to do that. I have other friends that, I don't play golf. I mean, I don't play golf because I want to be really good, really fast. Well, that's not the way it works. I mean, you got to take some time and effort and things like that. But I think this notion, there's a book called How to Do Nothing, and a friend of mine gave it to me. I made it to page 50, right? Because And I know there's something there I got to learn, right? Because just hanging out, and I have this beautiful backyard. We have a garden back here. And that's where I do a lot of my work. I have a very blessed life. And just to enjoy the beauty of it as opposed to it's a nice workplace, So, I mean, yeah, I hear that like doing things, being productive, it's like this engine that never ever runs out of energy and as opposed to enjoying. So that's my challenge is how do I enjoy my life a lot more? And I have a good life. So there's a lot to, it's interesting. I'm almost finished a book on happiness, and there's so many unhappy, lonely people in this world. I mean, it just is amazing. And it really boils down to one or two things, but it has something to do with procrastination. It's around the personal relationships you have. And you have to be healthy. I mean, if you're sick all the time, it impacts your happiness. A certain amount of money is helpful, but it's really relationships, both professional and personal relationships you have are really at the end of the day what makes people happy. And they have a lot of research to kind of show that. And yet we spend a lot of our time doing other things and not spending time with the people we care about, love, respect, admire, have friends with, and things like that. So it's a little bit of a tangent, but it's
Yeah.
not it's not complicated, but it's not easy.
And how do you know whether you accomplish these, let's say, aspirations or goals? How will you know whether you've actually done it to a satisfactory level?
I think you just have to explore your own ideas and thoughts. I mean, I do a lot of journaling. A lot of people are right. This is kind of the happiness thing. They write a gratitude journal, like for today, what am I grateful for? And and it could be something simple. The cup of coffee I had with Bill and Mary was just an enjoyable conversation. And then I went and I did a lot of work. But just reflecting, like your meditation practice, that's a very nice discipline to have. Discipline actually means to learn, right? I mean,
Mhm.
discipline is supposed to be you're jumping jacks and running down touchdowns and things like that. It really means to learn. And so having a gratitude journal is a nice step in the right direction, I think. Because then procrastinators especially will see, okay, I have done some things here. We took the kids to the park, we did some shopping already, and we didn't get to item number 4, but 3 of them were good. So I'm grateful for my children. I mean, the gratitude journal thing, I think, is a very powerful thing. Not just journaling your problems, but what are you grateful for?
What I hear in that is it's not actually that much about achieving something or being that productive, but it's the way you look at the things that you've actually done
Yes,
that makes the difference.
makes a difference. It's usually making other people's lives better, right? That's what you're
Yeah.
trying to profession, right? At the end of the day, if you can be of service, that's a gift for everyone. Everyone benefits from that. You benefit from it, and they benefit from it. And so, having money is not a bad thing. You can give people lots of opportunities and make the world a better place by being charitable. But it really comes down to making your life better and making someone else's life better somehow. If that's just listening, that's taking a walk with a friend, that's being careful with someone who's below. It's not real complicated. But and I think for procrastinators to bring it back to that, focusing on what you're grateful for and what you've accomplished can break the wedge of that beating yourself up.
Wonderful. Yeah. For everybody who has now the feeling that they do procrastinate, most of the time they know,
Yeah.
and needs some tools, some knowledge about where you want to go, creating a more clear vision for yourself, and understanding that self-compassion is a very crucial and essential part in that, then the book is really for you. And so that's at least what I gained myself from it. It's so well grounded in research and yet such an easy read, but it has so many powerful ideas in just paragraphs. So I think also, as you said it, you can just open the book somewhere in the middle, somewhere in the end, and you will find a very useful snippet, bit of information that will help you instantly to move forward. You don't have to read the whole book in order to actually get
No,
started,
that's a
which is
great point.
amazing.
No, that's a great point because procrastinators oftentimes won't. Just open it up, like Julian just said, anywhere, and there'll be something practical and doable that you can consider. The other thing I would suggest is, once again, that over aspirational people, oh, I can do this one and this one and this one and this one. If you just do one, Just one, that'll be huge. And then you get some success with that, and then maybe pick a second one. But to do 3 and 4 and 5 at the same time, you're just not very effective. And the name of the book is How to Be a Better Procrastinator. And it's on Amazon, if that's okay. It's Amazon book, so you can buy that. It's not real expensive. It's a good book. I'm proud of the book because it's practical and it's going to help people.
I can 100% agree. I also bought it myself. It's put the link also in the show notes so it can pick up right away.
What?
And thank you so much, Patrick, for joining me, for sharing all the wisdom of procrastination and your wisdom of life a little bit as well. It was such a pleasure to have this vivid conversation with you. And I take so many snippets again as from this as the empathy towards myself, understanding that I am a lot of the time self-critical with myself, and that is not the way to go. And it's so much more helpful just to have this reminder every once in a while to see that productivity is not always the way to go, but we can actually look back at the things that we've done already, and the way we think about those things is so powerful. So I'm very, very thankful that you shared this today. I'm glad that you took the time, and looking forward to all the positive responses that people will have, because it is such a nice book and an easy read.
Oh,
So
thank you very
so
much.
much.
I've enjoyed this, Julian, very much. Good luck going forward.
Now you can make a commitment to yourself and help others discover this podcast simply by subscribing and following the podcast on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. I hope to see you here soon again for the new episode dropping every other Thursday. Talk soon.